So, good afternoon, everybody. So, today I have Asha Shivaji joining us today from the United States. And she's joining us on Win Voices, our very own podcast at the Women Inspiring Network. And Asha was also our speaker at Cannes, which we've just concluded 2 weeks back. And so, of course, that is something which you can all watch on YouTube. But I'm going to just tell you a bit about Asha. So, she has worked with a lot of beauty brands, and she has been a trailblazer in inclusive marketing as a space. And her career has spanned across Google, Apple, Disney, Estee Lauder. And before she sort of started, and she's been a global speaker before she, of course, started SeeMe Index. So I'm going to ask Asha. Asha, in your own words, tell me about your entrepreneurial journey first. How did you start, the CE and being the CEO of SeeMe Index? So tell us a bit about your entrepreneurial journey, and I'm going to come back to you from the India question after that.
Absolutely. So thanks so much for having me today. And it was a pleasure to be at Cannes with the Win Network as well. So I decided to start See Me Index because as a consumer and both a marketer, I often felt very left out from brands. I never saw someone that looked like me in advertising. I never saw someone that looked like me in TV shows or in magazines. And I felt like there was a gap in the market as I started to grow in my career from marketing roles at Apple and Disney, Estee Lauder, I was at Google and I started to see this shift where brands realized they really needed to connect with consumers more. And they were asking us questions like, how do I know if I'm winning the hearts and minds of this opportunity audience? How do I know if I'm hitting the mark with my inclusive marketing efforts? And I loved that I was seeing them start to know that they needed to make a change, but we didn't have a great answer for that at the time. There wasn't a data-driven approach. So my co-founder and I decided to leave Google to start the SeeMe Index, where we build tech using responsible AI that measures how inclusive brands are and how they're reaching opportunity audiences. So I really saw a shift in the market that created an opportunity to bring a technological solution to the table.
I love it, what you just said, inclusivity. And of course, earlier when we were just chatting, you were telling me, how India is perceiving inclusivity in some of the beauty space. But I want you to tell us about your India Connect, of course, because your name is Asha and we talked about it. But since we are in India and Women Inspiring Network started in India, I
Yeah.
want you to tell us a bit about your India Connect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always love getting to talk about it because India has played such a formative part of my life. So I was born in the United States in Minnesota, grew up there in California. But growing up, we'd go to India every single year. And for me, it was critically important in sort of forming my identity because, as I mentioned, there wasn't someone that looked like me in my classrooms, in my on TV, anywhere. So going to India and getting to see this beautiful array of people that looked like me, that I didn't have to explain who I was and why my name was different or why I had a different skin tone, felt like home, even though in a lot of ways India can feel very foreign and very different from the United States. So I feel like so lucky that I got to grow up having two places that felt like home and gave me really different senses of self.
I'm so glad you sort of brought that up. But do you know that in India, every 100 kilometers, the language and
Yeah.
the food changes? We have so many states combined. So,
Yeah.
I come from a state like Rajasthan, but I don't know anything about Rajasthan. It's like that. So, but
Yeah. Well, and my mom's family's from Bangalore and my dad's is from Chennai. So I had a bit of that too, going between the cities and having different sort of foods and cultural like things. And it was always an adventure though, and we really enjoyed it.
yeah. And so, of course, you told us what inspired you, for the creation of SeeMe Index. But I want you to sort of elaborate, how is it changing the way brands are measuring inclusion? Because I'm not seeing that much of it in India, but I
Yeah.
know like US usually sort of takes the lead in everything, especially to do with marketing. So if you can just elaborate on that, that would be really interesting.
Absolutely. So at SeeMe Index, we're using responsible AI to measure all the consumer facing efforts of brands when it comes to inclusion. So we measure their ads, both brand assets and creator assets. We measure product and we measure purpose. And we measure all of that across 7 identity dimensions. So gender expression, skin tone, age, body size, hair type, visible disability, and sexual orientation. And we help brands understand where they're showing up for these different audiences across everything that they do. Because as I mentioned, oftentimes there's these gaps. Like I've worked on brands that put really diverse talent in the ads, but then I couldn't wear the shade of foundation on the brand. And I think brands today want to show up better for consumers, but they don't often understand where those gaps are. So with the measurement that we're bringing forward, we're able to give brands a roadmap to where they're leading, where they're lagging, and where they can better meet consumer expectations. I think what we're seeing in the market is that brands used to think of inclusive marketing as this mystical sort of effort, and they weren't exactly sure how to develop a strategy around it. With our data, we give them a really clear roadmap of how they can go to market in a more inclusive way.
Nice. And so, from building global strategies to founding your own company, what personal values have you guided on your leadership journey, and what is the impact you're aiming to create? If you can throw some light on that.
Yeah. So for me, and I think this is born out of my background too, is like I've always felt every person deserves to be seen and valued. And that's a core premise of what we're trying to bring to market with the impact that we have in helping brands really showcase different consumers and their needs. But it's also one of my leadership values whenever I'm managing a team in an organization is that I want everybody in every single chair to be able to use their voice and bring their ideas forward. I think when I think of my career, and in my early days of my career, I didn't always feel empowered to share my opinion. But when I'm hiring and when I'm building teams, that's exactly what I want. I don't know everything, nobody does. And I want that person's unique perspective. I want them to feel like they can lean in and share whatever is going to make our company more impactful and drive more value for consumers. So, really catering to showing value for all people is one of my core values.
And which was a moment which made you realize you wanted to focus on inclusive storytelling full time? Like when was it like you really felt you had to do this?
Yeah, it was really in, I guess it was like early 2023 when I felt a shift in the market starting to happen. It was something that I had always wanted to do. And while I was at Google, I had the opportunity to manage our partnership with the UN's Unstereotype Alliance that works to eradicate harmful stereotypes in media and advertising. I still consult for them today, along with being the CEO of SeeMe Index. But that was the first time in my career I got to actually focus on inclusion and inclusive marketing. And I loved it. I was like, how have I not been doing this my entire career? So getting that taste of it and then seeing the market starting to shift, I felt like this was the moment to lean in.
And what is your perception? Of course, you are in the United States, and I'm in India. But I mean, what's your perception? Because of course, about the Indian market on this. Like, what do you think? Like, are we really following, uh, inclusive marketing, or we have a long way to go?
Yeah, I would say every market has quite a long way to go. I'm definitely more of an expert in the US market, but I look at strides that I've seen in the US market, like casting more diverse skin tone talent in ads. Well, there's more presence of that talent in ads, the screen time still lags. So people with deeper skin tones in the US market get 1/3 of the screen time in ads than their lighter skin counterparts. So if I see that gap in the US market, I know that that's happening globally when we measure brands on a global basis as well. But what I do know is I think consumers today, and they may be acting on this in different ways in different markets, are demanding more and more that who they are and that their needs are represented by the brands that they shop from. So whatever is happening in the US, where we're seeing this sort of loud and proud from consumers, if you look at things like the retailer Target pulled back their DEI efforts and there's been a boycott that's really affected their sales over the last few quarters. I think we're going to see that more and more in other markets where consumers use their dollars or their rupees or their currency to really show brands what they care about and what they want. So, a more inclusive world, whether that's skin tone, disability, body sizes, we know that there's so many different representations of people and their needs that should be better taken care of by brands.
Yeah. So, in fact, for the longest time, what I noticed as a child growing up in India, earlier we used to have a lot of advertisements in India, which was, those fairness cream. So
Yes.
I used
Yeah.
to see that as a from a bias perspective.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
now you don't have those anymore. But it was like the brands which were sort of promoting fairer skin. If you apply this,
Yes.
your skin becomes fairer.
Yeah.
And I used to hear a lot about that, and now, of course, I understand inclusivity better. But it was, and I'm dark skinned, so I remember, some of the
Yeah.
old- older generation would say, "Oh my gosh, she's dark skinned," and you have to like rub these products, and
Yeah.
So, what's your take on that? Have you ever heard of?
Oh, I've absolutely heard of it, and I've experienced it by the older generations too. When I would visit India and I would come with like a tan from being out in the sun in California, and like older generations would be like, "Oh, what are you doing to your skin?" kind of thing. And I thought I looked great with a tan, and I
Yeah,
felt
I
great
think so.
with a
Now I
tan.
think it looks super hot and super cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
but it was really at tension. So, I'm glad brands are shifting away. Like I know the brand Fair and Lovely has shifted their brand name from that to Glow and Lovely now. I think brands are realizing what that they need to make efforts to accept people and celebrate people's unique beauty in a number of different ways. But I think India skin tone has always been a real focal point of how beauty is defined. But I think if we go further, when we look across the world at advertising, you rarely see a woman of color, 45 plus, with a larger body size in any ad. And how many women like that do we know that we think are beautiful and admirable, and we want to see them celebrated? And as marketers and as brand advocates, it's up to us to use our voice to
yeah,
drive more representation in groups like
yeah,
that.
yeah. That's exactly the reason our podcast is called Win Voices. Uh,
Yes.
how do you see responsible AI playing a role in the future of inclusive advertising?
You know, responsible AI has to be at the core of the future of inclusive advertising. I think AI is not going anywhere. And today there's a lot of worry about the bias and stereotypes in AI and how that can diminish certain groups and at worst erase certain groups. And it's absolutely a concern that we all have to have our eyes open to and be asking questions and pushing the development of AI not to do that. But my company wouldn't exist, we wouldn't be able to drive the sort of analysis that we drive without AI. So it's also really a tool to help on the journey for inclusion. So I think it's not going anywhere. It's so powerful to help us unlock what inclusion can look like, but there's a lot of work we have to do today to ensure that it doesn't have bias and stereotypes.
Yeah. And what's the one piece of advice would you give young professionals who are passionate about building brands that represent everyone?
Yeah, I would say you have to do it. I think if it's not you, who's going to do it? You have every right to be that advocate for the world you want to see, for the brand you want to build. And if you're not using that voice you have, the talent you have, the perspective you have, it's going to waste. So my ask, or rather like plea for the younger generation, is use that voice. It matters and it's going to shape the future.
Wow. And since we are a Women Inspiring Network platform, which is about inspiring others out there, I want you
Mhm.
to leave our viewers with an inspiring message for all our listeners. Any message?
Let's, any message. Okay. Well, my message would be self-acceptance and self-value. You bring a beautiful perspective, thinking, and mind to this world. And let's use it and let's make the world we want to see together.
And since we're reaching the end of the session, I also wanted to get your inputs, like any young professional who's starting out their journey in inclusive advertising space. What sort of skill set should they have? Like, what sort of one is, of course, skill sets, but what's the kind of talent you would look at if you're looking at hiring, and what does it really take to make it big in your industry?
Yeah, I would say I always look for someone not only with a skill set for the unique role we're looking for, but a passion for inclusion. I think understanding the many different aspects of inclusion and how a more inclusive world benefits all of us. Like, I often like to reference the example of in the US, there's sidewalk cuts where when you're crossing the street, the sidewalk goes down to allow like prams or wheelchairs to cross the street. But we all benefit from that. Everyone loves those sidewalk cuts. You don't have to walk up and down a curb. And I think when you think about designing or building a world for different unique groups, you really benefit everyone. So a sort of curiosity and passion for building a world that's more inclusive just has mass benefits. So I look for people who think like that.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. And our next stop is New York, September 24th. And I hope to see you there, Asha.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.